Here are your Court News Ohio top stories in 5 minutes. A Central Ohio nonprofit radio station that plays Christian music and uses space on its premises for church services qualifies for a property tax exemption, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled on April 14th. In a 4-3 decision, the Supreme Court found that Christian Voice of Central Ohio in Gahanna qualified under state law for a tax exemption because the more than 2-acre property was used primarily for religious purposes and not for profit. The radio station received the same tax break in New Albany before relocating to Gahanna. The decision reversed rulings by the Ohio Tax Commissioner and the Board of Tax Appeals. The majority determined that Christian Voice has dedicated all its land and buildings to charity and religion and has all the necessary attributes of a church. In a dissenting opinion, Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor asserted the majority announced a new and overly broad interpretation of the exemption that allows a station that sells millions of dollars in advertising to earn the tax break.
In another 4-3 decision, the Supreme Court justices on April 19th determined an Ohio man can sue the state's Department of Natural Resources for injuries caused by a negligent park employee. In 2011, an Ohio man was visiting Indian Lake State Park when a park employee mowing grass ran over a rock that shot into the man's face, causing serious injuries. The Supreme Court ruled the state can be held liable, as the law that shields the state from personal injury lawsuits due to hazardous land conditions doesn't extend to injuries caused by negligent state employees. The case affirmed a 10th District Court of Appeals ruling.
Ohio judges and their justice system partners teamed up on April 1st to learn about how past trauma can affect victims and offenders who come before the bench. The training focused on understanding trauma and explored how courts can become trauma competent. Courts encounter trauma in a number of ways. A veteran who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder may require additional evaluations and treatment, or a person who becomes a drug addict to cope with sexual or domestic violence. Nearly 200 team members heard mental health expert Dr. Brian Meyer discuss trauma from an evidence-based perspective. He explored the brain's response to trauma and practical steps courts can take to become trauma competent.
If we're going to look at people from a, have you been traumatized? If so, how does that affect you? How does it affect your brain? How does that translate into your behavior? That's very different than saying, you're a person who came in and you've committed X, Y, and Z crimes, and now you're going to pay for it.
Dr. Meyer said courts need to have a different way of thinking to become trauma competent, including how they talk to offenders and victims, how they organize their physical space in the courtroom, and how they hold individuals accountable for completing treatment programs. Gallup Police Municipal Court Judge Margaret Evans has 2 specialized dockets in her courtroom. She said having drug and mental health courts allow her to intensively discuss each individual's problems.
It's important for the whole system to operate properly, that we understand what's motivating people. And I think that's where identifying trauma comes in and is very important, so that we can address some of the source and try to then cut recidivism rates.
The Ohio Supreme Court hosted the training so more courts across the state can start implementing these practices in their courtrooms and become trauma competent.
A familiar face took over the reins at the Ohio Center for Law-Related Education. Kate Strickland became the new executive director on April 1st. Strickland has held a variety of positions during her 14-year career at OCLRE: Director of Resources, Program Coordinator for the Law and Citizenship Conference and the Youth for Justice programs, and most recently Deputy Director.
I'm excited for the next challenge, not only for me but for the organization. We know our programming is really quality, and we know that from the feedback we get from teachers. I want to make sure that we can make more people aware, and that students continue to have opportunities for authentic experiences and interactions with members of each branch of the government.
OCLRE provides civic education programs to teachers and hosts mock trials and civic competitions for students. Strickland said a prime example of what they do was the middle school mock trial showcase held at the Thomas J. Moyer Ohio Judicial Center.
We get to see the programs come to life, literally. The students are here, there's so much energy and excitement. And it's the culmination of the work that's put in by teachers, by students, by members of the legal community.
That's a look at Court News Ohio's top stories. Visit courtnewsohio.gov for the latest headlines on Ohio's courts. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter.